I've been on countless adventures with my Sony A7 IV, and it's completely changed my wildlife photography journey. This is just a handful of moments that the A7 IV has helped me capture. And in this video, I'm going to show you why I believe this just might be an excellent choice for you in 2024. One of the first things that really impressed me was the autofocus system. This camera has 759 autofocus points that cover 94% of the screen, ensuring quick and accurate focus. But what truly amazed me was the animal and bird eye tracking. This feature alone really changed how I captured wildlife. Knowing I can rely on the camera to achieve focus means I can spend more time framing the subject or adjusting other settings on the fly. With a fast focusing lens, this camera is more than capable of capturing a tricky subject like the ruby-throated hummingbird. However, it is important to note that if your subject is small in frame, or the scene is too busy, the camera may struggle to detect the eye or the subject altogether. These autofocus features carry over into video as well. I can simply tap on the screen to set eye tracking. And just like before, knowing I can rely on the camera to hold focus on the subject means I can confidently reframe my shot to capture the action. Here's a more challenging example for the camera. As the heron moves behind the grass, the camera loses focus, but it's able to recover relatively quickly, and it even tracks the heron right up to the very moment it flies off screen. Next, let's explore the capabilities of the sensor in this camera. The Sony A7 IV features 5.5 stops of in-body stabilization, which is excellent for handheld shooting. Pairing this with a lens that also has optical stabilization makes it all that much easier to capture sharp photos and videos handheld. Here's a moment I didn't want to miss out on, and there was no time to set up a tripod. The footage is looking a bit jittery, but if you film in 60 FPS and slow the footage down to 40% playback speed, the video actually becomes a bit smoother and easier on the eyes. The 33 megapixel sensor in this camera also offers a great balance of resolution and low light performance, meaning you can crop your images further and print large detailed photos. This camera also captures fantastic dynamic range, allowing you to stretch both the shadows and the highlights further when you edit your images. Now let's talk video quality. I'll try to keep this part simple, but it is one of my favorite things about this camera. The Sony A7 IV can capture up to 120 frames per second in 1080p, and I've actually never tried it up until now. Here's a clip I captured recently of a green heron shaking its head in slow motion. This footage has been slowed down 20%, and I gotta tell you, this makes me really wish I could shoot 120 in 4K. In 4K, this camera can capture up to 60 frames per second, and this is my go-to for capturing wildlife. I find it's the perfect frame rate to slow down the footage just enough for a really cinematic look. However, there is a catch. When filming in 4K 60 FPS, the camera automatically switches over to APS-C mode. For an example of this, here's my bearded dragon at 4K 24 FPS. Now, when I switch it over to 60 FPS, you can see the crop applied to the video. I find this useful for wildlife, as I often want to get closer to my subject, and this allows me to do that without a loss in quality. That's because this camera actually captures a 7K image that's downsampled to 4K in the recording process. This process helps the camera reduce noise and improve the overall quality of the final result. Here's an example where I was filming an eastern screech owl after sunset at 10,000 ISO. As long as the video is well exposed and there's some sort of light present, it really does a great job at handling the noise. And in the second example, that's 12,800 ISO. Before diving into the final section of this review, I had a few key considerations to keep in mind if you're considering the A7 IV. One major concern that many people have with the A7 IV is overheating. This can be a serious issue in warmer conditions, especially if you plan on recording for longer periods of time. I've had my camera overheat in less than 10 minutes on a warm day. Thankfully, there is an option in the menus to increase the camera's tolerance to overheating. Another consideration to keep in mind is that this camera can only shoot up to 6 photos per second in uncompressed RAW. This might be a deal breaker for some, but if you switch over to compressed RAW, you can shoot 10 photos per second with minimal quality loss. Last, this camera has received some criticism for its rolling shutter. This is more noticeable in fast camera movements, or in scenes with artificial lighting. Personally, this hasn't been an issue for me because I'm often filming still wildlife subjects in a naturally lit environment. Here's an example of a different type of rolling shutter. When you're shooting in silent mode with the electronic shutter, fast-moving subjects can become warped. Switching over to a mechanical shutter usually solves this issue. Now, let's talk about battery life. In my experience, I can get through a whole day of casual shooting without an issue. Of course, this varies if you're leaving the camera on all day or capturing tons of images. Officially, the Sony A7 IV is rated for 670 photos on a single battery. As for continuous recording, I've managed to record up to an hour and a half on one battery, so I'd say that's pretty impressive. A second one would definitely still be useful though. This is the Sony A7 IV in hand. It has a good-sized hand grip, which I find pretty important for the overall handling of this camera, especially in the winter when you have to wear larger gloves. I find the button layout really good, and the best part is, a lot of these buttons and dials can be fully customized to fit your own shooting style. What's unique about this camera is the switch at the front. This controls the dial at the bottom, which allows you to switch from photo, video, and S&Q mode. On top of that, the camera remembers the settings you last used in each mode, and you can customize all the buttons differently for each one. A really quick example of this is in photo mode. My AEL button here is programmed to crop mode. Switch over to video, and it is programmed to focus peak. Another useful control here is this joystick. It allows you to move your focus box around or navigate the menus. And then there's this wheel here. For whatever purpose you customize it to, it can be locked into place to stop it from spinning. Moving on from the buttons, this camera has a 3-inch touchscreen. This screen also flips out and rotates, which is really useful for getting those low angles without needing to get all the way down to the ground yourself. Now, one thing I miss about my old Sony model is being able to simply flip the screen up to see those low angles without the need of first flipping the screen out and rotating it towards you, which can leave it vulnerable to being hit by mistake. Around the side, you'll find a full-sized HDMI port, mic jack, headphone jack, Type-C port, and below that, a multi-port for additional connectivity options. And all the way around to the other side is where your SD cards are housed. At the bottom, there's a standard SD card slot. Above that, a second SD card slot. And behind it is a slot for a CFExpress Type A card. Keep in mind that you can only use one card at a time in the top slot. Finally, the overall build quality of this camera feels solid. It's taken some bumps here and there and continues to operate perfectly fine. As for the weather sealing, I have fully trusted this camera to hold up in all sorts of different weather conditions. Overall, the Sony A7 IV offers a great blend of both photo and video features, reliable autofocus, and excellent build quality, making it a great choice for wildlife photographers in 2024. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I really hope it's helped you decide whether this camera is right for you or not. While you're here, check out some of my recent videos where I take you on a wildlife photography journey, all which feature the Sony A7 IV. So, I hope to see you in the next one.